So to clarify on the title, this doesn't necessarily mean that she's the most important or the character who matters the most or at all. Like, of course, Stephen is still the main character, and Stanky Operda is my favorite from the series. This is just me more so realizing and trying to share how she's could be like the most influential and iconic character, like mostly from a meta sense, as well as like the impact on the series and the ideals it had in representing those. And this came to me as I was on a binge listening to Doesn't This Have a Name a bunch of times, and like I realized that a lot of my favorite like songs and just like moments from the series involve Garnet. And it seems to be the case for a lot of people. In fact, not too long ago before that, The Simpsons apparently had some sort of like mural, which was like a poster dedicated to iconic women characters in animation. And at first they had Betty Boop, and I'm honestly not sure who that is in the 1940s. But then they start to get like a bit more loose and like not like super impactful. Like I'm glad the characters are there. I like Daria a lot. I'm glad to see Daria there. Then the Powerpuff Girls are just like whatever, a shoo-in. And then Louise Belcher. I mean, don't get me wrong, Louise is the shit, but is she really this like huge, impactful, influential character? Like, I feel like that they're throwing like Fox shows a bone, or a more sad case is that they just simply couldn't really think of much. But I mean, if you're gonna get as loose as Louise, we might as well get even more liberal with the amount of characters that we're choosing in, and include others. And a specific character that some of my friends on Discord were pointing out that was missing from there and wondered why they didn't include more, including this one, was Garnet. And it's interesting that specifically Garnet, and like not anybody else. And like not long before this video too, after I came up with the idea of it, we were just like reminiscing about the series, and just coincidentally a lot of the moments that we were talking about involved Garnet. And this is what I'm going to be beginning with now. I'm going to go through a lot of topics through this, but at first I'm going to be talking about how Garnet was constantly involved in a lot of the iconic and emotional scenes, and then go through her other history and impact on the meta, and why she kind of deserves to be seen as so iconic and influential and be included and stuff like that. So you start with the series in like Fusion in season 1B, and yeah, there's like hints for being a fusion and such, but like I'm thinking of stuff like that was right there, like the end of Future Vision, which is really amazing scene, especially early on. I've been saying this for a bit, but I honestly think season 1B and 2 are the best, so I might be gushing over them a lot, and I should just hurry up and make that video already. But yeah, there's that, and then there's that super emotional scene where they first encounter the forced fusions, and she starts crying. I swear I'll talk better from now on. And then there's the whole flashback story about Ruby and Sapphire meeting during Stephen's birthday. Just that whole scene has like a lot of wonder and emotion to it. Then a lot of her fights are iconic, like with Jasper and such, like more on that later. And then Here Comes the Thoughts was like one of the most like impactful songs to come out from the show. And then there's her wedding, which like they fought really hard to fucking get on the air. Like they shouldn't have had to, but they did it and they won, thankfully. And it has a technically gay kiss on there. I mean, I know that Garnet's technically genderless as a gem, but I mean, she uses the female pronouns and stuff, so that's good enough, especially when it comes to influential women. And then, of course, last and not at all least, is Stronger Than You. This probably still is like the most huge ass moment from the whole series, and just like one of the biggest moments in Cartoon Network in general, and just I would say TV animation in general. Like, this is a scene that won over a lot of people like to the show and got them to start becoming fans of it. And like when I first saw this, like I was already like kind of a fan of the show. Like I was checking in like here or there, but wasn't super dedicated. I was like, yeah, I like this. And then Stronger Than You happened, and I think I might have talked about this in my history video. But yeah, that's like what really got me like off my seat and excited, and it's fucking huge. And then of course her songs in the movies were like the ones that are the most highlighted and stuff. It's probably partly for that reason of just like Garnet songs are always this huge fucking deal. Like I already mentioned, Isn't It Love? And then of course they kept on showing off It's the True Kind of Love. And like when it comes to songs being played at events, like, you don't see the others. Like, you specifically see Garnet songs all the time like that, and they're playing, like, Stronger Than You as part of, like, a pride ceremony and stuff. And that leads up to my next topic, which may be the most important one for this, was that how much Garnet represents their ideas of, like, acceptance and equality, and the LGBT undertones of all of it. Like, Garnet's whole entire idea of a relationship is, like, an equal relationship between, like, two people of the same group. And that, of course, being Ruby and Sapphire, looking feminine, representing, like, two lesbians getting together. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Garnet influenced a lot of people to come out, and, like, they play her as, like, such, like, a key character, and they make her so likable and shit. And, like, Garnet's just, like, a great character, and, like, they just never question, like, why, like, two gems who want to stay together all the time fused, at least, like, not from the protagonist side. And yet, like, it's specifically Garnet who you see mentioned when it comes to, like, representing, like, gay pride and stuff, and, like I mentioned earlier of the ceremony, like, when you first think of, like, a lot of the relationships in the show, like, there's some other ones, of course, like Pearl being into Rose and shit, but Garnet is typically the first that you think of and the most obvious. So yeah, that was pretty cool that they're able to have a character like that. And now I just kind of want to talk more about Garnet's, like, character, just, like, who she is as a person. And I want to say that, like, of course, there's, like, all of that, like, leadership and, like, other stuff from there, but I just want to say how, like, especially earlier on in the series, she just had this, like, super, like, powerful aura to her. Like, if she was in the room, like, you paid attention to her. There's just something that was so mysterious about her and so enticing, like, you just wondered about her, and something about her just, like, drawed off your attention towards her. Like, she just seemed so important, and, like, you just had to, like, be respectful with her, and whenever she talked, you always had to, like, listen to her talk. And, like, I mean, it's the same in it's the same sense in the show, really. Like, everybody just looked up to her, and, like, whenever she came back from something, they were always, like, glad and excited to see her. And, like, I mean, yeah, like, Garnet just, like, kind of felt like this, like, big, mysterious, like, powerful, unstoppable force, and almost like a lore keeper, too, in a sense. Like, I mean, she didn't open up as much as the others earlier on in the series. It took a while, but then it was good when it did happen. And, like, another reason why I kind of, like, loved the series earlier on, to, like, not get too on topic of that, but a lot of it was with, like, the foreshadowing. Like, it had masterful foreshadowing there, and Garnet had a lot of that, like, fusions stuff, you know? Like, Garnet playing the key guitar, which is a fusion of a piano, or a keyboard and a guitar, and her saying two in the same scene. I actually remember seeing people discuss about her being a fusion. They're like, I don't know, maybe she was just born with two gemstones. But yeah, like, Garnet just always had this, like, strong, like, aura to her. Like, you just had to see whatever she did, and you had to listen to whatever she said. And she just seemed to be, like, the most on top of everybody, even, like, later on revealed that's not exactly the case, but she still kept that kind of aura and iconicism to her. It reminds me of this one thing somebody wrote. I know this seems like a really random comparison, but it reminds me of after Sephiroth was announced to Smash, and I remember reading some random comment about someone talking about why his inclusion is so good, where just, like, even though he was only made up of a few polygons, there was just something about him that gave off this powerful vibe and this commanding aura where you had to stop and focus all attention on him when he was in the room, and he was just, like, always, like, the most, like, powerful feeling presence in there. Like, that's kind of the same sentence I get from Garnet. Like, even, like, earlier on is the most prominent, but even later in the series it was still there, but not in a menacing or villainous sense like with Sephiroth. But yeah, that's not all, because even though we talked a lot about, like, big, emotional, iconic moments, she was also the giver of a lot of the funny and heartwarming ones, too. Like, there's something about her deadpan and serious deliveries, again, especially earlier on. Like, all of Garnet's universe, I fucking love that episode. I don't care what cold-hearted dumb people who say, oh, it's bad because something happens in it thing. Like, they just kind of need to wake up and learn to have fun. But yeah, due to Garnet's seriousness, like, it just made everything about her, like, way more funny and inherently funny. Like, of course, there's Garnet on the phone and saying, oh no, they're dead, don't call back. And then her bailing off the fan when Greg wanted to play his CDs, and don't gems need rest too? You guys look awful, exhausted, and we look awesome. Like, there's just so many quotable lines from Garnet, like, that's both funny and just memorable and, like, iconic. Like, every time she talked about, like, love or being in love romantically or just loving someone platonically, like, Stephen, we love you. And, like, her whole entire speech on, like, the forced fusions and just, like, I don't know, there's so much to her that speaks out. And, like, I feel like of all of the characters, Garnet had, like, the most, like, impact on, like, actually changing, like, somebody's life. With some of the advice she gives, as well as that, like, representation I was talking about earlier. But yeah, I don't know how much I just, like, simply mumbled this through, but I'm hoping you all get an idea of how Garnet just always had this, like, presence as, like, the most, like, metally important character. Like, she always had this, like, powerful stance to her, and she was always involved in, like, the biggest moments, like, stronger than you, and take a reason to think of just, here comes the thoughts, and, like, she also seemed to be the most, like, hyped up for the movie, aside from Spinell herself, whose name we didn't even get until then. Like, they were advertising It's the True Kind of Love before that. Like, they weren't advertising the other stuff, really. But yeah, like, she also just, like, had the most, like, influence, too, in the meta, like, the themes I was talking about and stuff of, like, gay relationships and equality and all of that. Like, I feel like she was, like, the strongest symbol for that and had the most influence, and, like, even changed the network, too, to have them be more loose on that. I mean, like, after all of this, like, I don't have, like, many shirts with many characters on it from Steven Universe. Like, I have a Homeworld one because they were my babes back then. I make it sound sexual, but I mean it in a nice way. But yeah, like, I have a shirt of Garnet with Ice Bear. Like, I don't have, like, Amethyst with Ice Bear, not to be dissing on her. But yeah, like, whenever I just think about, like, the series, like, themes of, like, love and peace and shit, like, I often think about Garnet and how she could have just made more people feel more comfortable in their bodies, more so than a lot of the other characters. And I still remember her through the funniest moments in the series. I mean, like, to go back to the Sephiroth comparison, like, I feel like if there's ever some, like, big cartoon crossover thing again, like, I would be more excited to see Stephen, like, with Garnet, or just her over Stephen. Like, I see it as, like, Stephen first, then way later, and Garnet comes in, and it's like, oh shit, she's here. Like, I just feel like she's, like, the most deserving to be that remembered, like, with everything they've done with her. But it is all a matter of opinion. I will just end this, though, going back to her memorable lines, is that the final line of the series that sticks to me the most was hers also, with her whole entire speech about, I couldn't help it, I had to take a look in the future, and everyone I saw were there together, part of your life. Like, that's the one that gets to me the most, and I think it's also a good part to end this bad video on. See you all next time.